Focus Point Toastmasters for the last year. She's also a member of her work corporate club since 2018. The goal of her speech this evening is to help us better understand the myriad of identities that make up the LGBTQ plus community, and to raise awareness and encourage the use of inclusive language in our everyday lives. So I think she'll tell me whether I used ladies, dame, chicks correctly. And over to you, Franz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, fellow Toastmasters. Hello, my name is Franz. I identify as a cisgender gay woman, and I go by the pronouns of she, her, hers. But that's only a small part of who I am. I'm also a daughter, a friend, a sister, a co-worker, a dog mom, an atheist, a traveler, a hiker, a card and a game player, a sore loser, a hobby chef, and a Toastmaster like all of you. I delivered a version of this speech to the Focus Point Club a few months ago. It was part of a pathway project that talked about delivering a speech with a purpose. It was inspired by wanting to have more inclusive language in our meetings, to avoid the ladies and gentlemen type of language. I tried correcting the members, but I thought if people really could understand, then that would be a lot more effective. I'm not naive. It's not easy for anyone. I'm old. I came out nearly 40 years ago where there was only 2 letters to this acronym: gay and lesbian. The addition of BTQ2+, etc. is all new to me too. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I try to understand and be as inclusive and embrace the diverse world that we live in. Today's presentation is based on a curriculum developed by the Safe Zone program. It's an online resource for powerful, effective LGBTQ2+ awareness and ally training. The content of is a small part of an hour-and-a-half workshop that I deliver along with colleagues in my workplace. Obviously, in 15 minutes, we won't have time to cover everything, but at least we can raise awareness and get the discussion going. Let me just share my screen now. Good. I want to say that the few slides I'm going to use today are actually part of the Safe Zone project website, and they make their content available for use and non-proprietary, which is so wonderful. It's a great resource for anyone. With that, we'll move on. If I can move on, there we go. This first slide I call the word jumble. We all know there's a large vocabulary associated with the LGBTQ2+ community, and it keeps growing and changing. Some of the words on this slide, I'm not going to read them all. I'll let you look at it. You might know. Others you may never have heard of, never mind, know what they mean. We'll cover some of these tonight, but we don't have time to go over everything. I'm more than happy to answer questions after if you have specific ones. We will then move on to my favorite slide, the genderbread person. So with this genderbread person, we'll go through all the different sections that make up this genderbread person's identity and all of ours as well. We'll start out with gender identity. You can see that's in your head, in your brain. It is in our minds how we know ourselves to be. It's a psychological sense of gender. For example, I feel and I identify as a woman. It's also based on what we understand of our options for gender and how we align or not align with those options. Next, we move to the attraction. Nice little heart. Attraction and sexual orientation. I'll group those together. That is our heart. It's the way we categorize and define who we're attracted to, how we're pulled to other people. It's often categorized based on our gender and the gender of those we're attracted to. This is absolutely distinct and separate from our gender identity. So let's just keep that in mind. Then we have our biological sex. This refers to the anatomical sex or the sex assigned at birth. It refers to both the primary traits we're born with, the chromosomes, the anatomy, and secondary traits we may develop later, like hormonal, breasts, and chest hair. If you look on the other side, it covers everything. This is gender expression. This is the way we present ourselves to the world and how the gendered world sees us. It includes clothing, makeup, haircut, actions, and demeanors, the sachet that we all know as a typical gay man move. It's our outwardly appearance to the world and presentation. We have to say this can be interpreted differently in different areas of the world, like a woman with short hair or men wearing skirts here versus in Scotland versus an abaya in the Middle East. But don't be fooled. Gender expression, it's not solely representative of gender identity or sexual orientation. You still cannot tell just by how the person presents. It's a standalone component of the genderbread person. We'll try to tie this all together. So first of all, a disclaimer. I work in a scientific sector and with lots of graphs and analysis. These are not scientific graphs. They're just meant to serve as visual aids and to show us the fluidity of things. So we'll start out with a gender identity. I'll just say, yes, you can see my mouse, so that's good. So on the x-axis at the top, we have sex assigned at birth, and on the y-axis, the vertical one, we have internal sense of gender. So if you look at this, if I'm a female and I identify as a female, that puts me in the cisgender bubble. If I'm a male and I identify as a male, that puts me in the cisgender bubble. If I'm a male who identifies as a female, puts me in the transgender bubble. And if I am a female who identifies as a male, also the transgender bubble. Now, it's important to say that we're talking about the internal sense of self. So it's regardless of any transition stage that there might be. So whether it's dressing, it's medical, it's surgical, or it's just how we feel, it really doesn't matter. Some people, some transgender people will never go through any of the transition stages, and others will go part way and others will go all the way. So regardless of that, it really refers to the internal sense of self. Another important point that's really well illustrated in this graph is the everything in between. We don't all fall in to some nice little square, a bubble. There is a lot of fluidity and a lot of in between. So, when our internal sense of self, which we have over here, is neither male nor female, or it might be a fluid state, that's referred to as non binary, which we can see over here. Intersex is when a child is born with undefined or unclear sex assigned at birth. I used to work in the neonatal ICU at Children's Hospital, and back in the day we had the pink cards and the blue cards on the bassinets, and once in a while there was a white card. I don't know if they still use the blue and pink. I would hope not, but anyway, I'd have to check with some of my colleagues that are still there. So I know I say it's important a lot during this speech, but it is. It's important to know that when you hear someone identified to or referred to as cisgender, transgender, or non binary, that is their gender identity, and it has nothing to do with their sexual orientation or who they're attracted to. For that, we will move on to our next graph. This is the sexual orientation graph. So on the x-axis, we have our gender identity, and on the y-axis, we have the gender attraction. So who you're pulled towards, who you're attracted to. So we'll start out by the obvious ones. You have a female, and I'm attracted to a male. That puts me in the straight bubble. If I'm a male attracted to female, that also puts me in the straight bubble. If I'm a female attracted to female, that puts me in the lesbian bubble. And if I'm a male attracted to male, that puts me in the gay bubble. Those, I think, are ones that we're all pretty familiar with. But again, look at this graph. It's all over the place. There's a lot of in-betweens. So another one that's, I think, pretty familiar is if you're a male or female and you're attracted to both. And I watch my language when I say that, and I say both. So that puts you on the bisexual part. There's also, if you looked at the bottom here, neither. So regardless of whether you identify male, female, or non-binary, there should be a non-binary up here, by the way, but I'll pass that on. And it says gender attraction is neither. So it could be that you're asexual, which means not attracted to either gender. And just to add to the vocabulary, you can be asexual but not aromantic. So you can have a romantic attraction without having a sexual attraction. And then the other one is pansexual, which is if the gender of the other person does not factor into your attraction. It doesn't matter what's the gender. I will just keep on going because we will put that in to use in our language, LGBTQ2+ language do's and don'ts. So here, there's a whole bunch of what to avoid and what to use instead language. I'm not going to go through all of them because we don't have time. However, can share these slides after, and you'll have them as reference. I want to run through a few that are common. And one of them is, the first one is, I'll go through the ladies and gentlemen, which I referred to in my introduction. So that one is just too binary. It implies that there's only two options. So to be more inclusive in your language, such as folks, everyone, honored guests, Toastmasters, you can start out that way. The other one I'll touch on is both genders are opposite sex. Well, again, it implies there's only two options. So to be more inclusive, you can say all genders. I read somewhere too that some people feel that the opposite sex, opposite part is a bit confrontational. And that might be how it's seen by someone. I'll also talk about two other ones that are not on this list, but that I see all the time. He/she, when we don't know about who the person is at all. So I have an example. I'm sitting on a school board and we're going to be hiring a new teacher. The teacher's not hired yet, so we don't know who it is. Well, he or she will be starting March 1st. Again, that's just doesn't leave any in between room. So how about they will be starting March 1st? The other one, and I have to say, I'm guilty of that one, and I struggle and I try hard to catch myself, is, hey guys, come on, the meeting is starting, be quiet. Guys, we don't not everyone identifies as guys. We're not guys. I don't identify guys, but I still use that. It's a social norm, but it's not inclusive. So again, I would say, folks, kids, camper, hey everyone, just try to make it more general, generic. So in conclusion, I challenge each and every one of us, including me, to be aware, mindful of the words we choose. Let us strive to create an environment where everyone feels seen, heard, and respected. By adopting inclusive language, we not only break down barriers, we also build bridges understanding and acceptance. It's through our collaborative effort that we create a world where diversity is celebrated. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Yes. Hey, thanks. Thanks, Franz. It was very comprehensive, and I've seen these slides before. We went over them as a practice, and I absorbed a lot more this time, and there were still some fuzzy areas, so it is something that's going to really take me a while to fully grasp. The first question I have for you is in terms of the language using the pronouns. I find it, especially the they pronoun, I'm getting used to it because I do know a few gender neutral, gender neutral people in my life, and so I'm wanting to practice referring to them as they, and it is getting easier as I go along, but still in some situations where I know with other people who aren't used to it, it feels a little awkward. And I'm wondering, for you, are you using these pronouns in casual? This language is general in casual conversation. Is it more in the corporate world? How have you learned to change your language?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and it's a evolving answer, I have to say. I work in a corporate world, and we do use the pronouns in our signature, in our email signatures. I would say maybe 80% of people have their pronouns there. How we say it at work is then it leaves no room for assumption. I can read your email and it says Laurel. I can see your face and it says, I see a female. I don't know how you identify. But if it's in, I've seen your email, then I know it's not an assumption. In the everyday world, social world, I would say, I have not seen it used very much for my circle of friends and my generation, I would say. However, I have asked around my younger friends, or my friends' kids usually, and a lot of them do introduce themselves as, hi, my name is Franz, and my pronouns are she, her. So I think it's a long way before it's part of our everyday conversation. But I think it's would be so wonderful that everyone would feel comfortable if that became the norm, because again, there will leave no room for assuming. And if I can, yeah, there we go. That's my answer.
Hey, that's great. Thanks. And when we were discussing this before, I mentioned about my granddaughter who does identify as gender neutral. And they were telling me that when meeting new people, say, going into a dance class, it's perfectly normal to go up to the other person as you're introducing yourself and say, "Hi, I'm so and so. My pronouns are, they, them, or she, her, whatever." And it seems to be that this is a part of the what's the word, etiquette. Yeah, it's not interesting. Hey, my second question is this, for us, especially my generation, which is a little older than yours, is that it all just seems too confusing. I hear this, from my sisters and other. Well, I shouldn't just point the finger at them, but I do hear this from people that they're just not going to bother because it just is too much work. There's, how can you think about it? It's enough to navigate socially. And I was thinking, like, these using this terminology, does it confuse things, learning that, or does it clarify things in your mind?
See, I've always disliked putting people in a box. I always thought we don't all fit in perfectly in this little box. With all the terminology that we talked about tonight, and then there's a lot more, to me, it feels like it's almost divisive. However, if you try to use the inclusive language that, oh, I forgot to say the policeman and fireman, and um, uh, instead of saying that police officer, firefighter. So if you try to use this kind of language, use they more often in your everyday life, then I think it makes it easier because it's just general. It's not pinpointing. I think it does take a long time. A friend of mine actually gave me a book that she found at her family cabin a long time ago. And her granddad was a Toastmaster. And it was a Toastmasters book from way back in the day. And it was only men were allowed in the group. And it was all about the man will do this, will do that. And I was reading it and I was kind of laughing because that was the norm back then. So we just need to change what our norm is. It takes time, it takes a conscious effort, it takes an open mind, it takes time, but if we all try to be inclusive, I think it would simplify things.
Well said, Franz. And I'm going to open it up to questions from everyone else because I'm sure that that everyone's eager to participate. And so just put your hand up or say hey, and I'll spotlight you so you can ask your question. Who's first? All right, so I'm gonna pick on somebody because that's what they do. Okay. Can I pick on you, Sarah?
Absolutely, because I just unmuted myself and I was thinking of something that
Oh, okay, great.
that Franz had said, and something that I had always wondered as a cisgendered woman. I always felt that using my pronouns she and her felt like a privilege, and that like, I don't know how to describe it, but when you talked about it being an opportunity to reduce somebody having to make an assumption about me, it made so much more sense. So it's not about me necessarily. It's about giving the other person the freedom to not have to make a judgment or an assessment or an assumption about me. And that just totally flipped the script for me. So I really, really appreciated the way you described that it's an opportunity to reduce assumptions. So people don't have to make an assumption when they meet me. Do you see what I'm saying about how, you know, like as a cisgender woman, you kind of feel, well, you know, the assumptions tend to lean in my favor as a cisgender woman, because those are the assumptions that most people would make. But when you described it as, well, this is an opportunity to reduce the need to even make an assumption just by using your pronouns, that made so much sense to me. So I really appreciated that. So thank you for sharing that.
Good, thank you for those comments. I think you raise a good point. It's easy for you to say, I'm France and I go by the pronouns he, she, her. The conversation stops there. However, if you put yourself into somebody else's place and they say, hi, my name is France and I go by the pronouns they, then it raises some questions that maybe you don't want to have this conversation right now. You're at the, I don't know, at a cocktail party and that's not what it's about, or you're at a work function and that's not what it's about. So you raise a good point by saying it's easier for us. But at the same time, and I think the people that want to go and be identify as non-binary or want to be addressed by they, they're just letting us know, which is good. And I stuck my foot in really good on many occasions where somebody was talking to me about they, and they were talking about their children. It was somebody new I never met before. I didn't know how many children they were talking about. And I said, well, how many are they? And they said, oh, it's just one. My child goes by they. And I just thought, oh, I just said that. I can't believe it. But you know what? It's part of the learning, and we just move on and acknowledge our assumption, because I just made an assumption. So thank you. Thanks for that comment.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And who is next? Okay, here,
I will
Katie.
speak if I can. Yeah. Thank you, Franz, for this presentation. I think I've done it maybe a few years ago through social services and some of the work I was doing there. And it's true, it is a process that you have to kind of practice, and getting used to the language, that they thing. I'm of a generation where I still think of they is the plural, and it really mixes me up, and it's taken some practice. I have a family member who went from transgendered from female to male. There was a brief transition, and just trying to be respectful and getting that language right. And it's true in this that it's taking away the exception, the questions and how to approach people, but also showing them respect if you're acknowledging them in the way that they are preferring. And sometimes it can be a chance for them, if they're feeling comfortable, to talk more about this gender fluidity and all that goes with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And who is next? That was a great comment, Katie. Oh, here's Leonora. Yeah.
It's actually Leonarda, like Leonardo.
Oh yes, Leonarda. Thank you.
That's okay. So Franz, thank you. Very timely topic for sure. I still get confused. How would you deal with, I would think mostly older generation who feel prejudice against this whole change in how we use our pronouns? I met somebody who thinks that bringing it into elementary school and kindergarten is just absurd and horrible and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they disagree with the whole thing. So yeah, how would you talk to these people, or how would you shed some light on that to them, or yeah, that's the open question.
Oh, wow, that's a tough one, right? I would start with probably my inner circle. My dad is older generation. Hey, I put him through a lot. He had to learn a lot from just me coming out, but he did good. And at the same time, it's hard to get around to new ideas and new concepts. And so for me, talking on one, say, okay, just it doesn't matter. Does it matter what this person refers to, how this person identify, how this person dress, how this person does this or that? It doesn't matter to you. One of the reasons I was asked to do these workshops at work, and at first I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And then why would I do that? I just don't want to talk about it. And then I thought, okay, we have to talk about it in order to not talk about it. So I always say when I do the workshops at work, I say, the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm talking about this is because I don't want to talk about this later on. So it's just to open people's mind. Now, in the broader sector, like you mentioned, of school boards and parent committees and things, I just would have to refer to professionals because really, on a one-on-one, I think you can, I want to say affect, or you can reason or make people understand as a group with any kind of movement to try to sway a whole generation, a whole movement. That's very difficult, and I would be just stumped. And again, so the younger you introduce the general language, the inclusive language, don't put policeman and fireman in the school books. Don't even mention that. Just start it out as firefighter, and that will be the norm for the kids growing up. We won't be talking about this.
Right.
But the books are not written that way. And and by the way, I appreciate that you put your pronouns in your
Okay.
in your name. Thank you.
I did that when you were talking. I'm like, shit.
Yeah, good to you. Yes.
May I share a short story?
Oh.
Around, well, it was first year university for me, like 45 years ago. And the course director of the course called Minorities in Canada, she had a brother that was in New York, and he came to be a guest speaker, and he happened to be gay and homosexual. Again, forgive me if I don't have the right terms. So I had never met anybody that I knew was gay. And he spoke so incredibly well. I thought to myself, who the hell am I to worry about what people do behind closed doors? And it completely shifted any prejudgments I had. And I was so grateful for the course and so grateful for him coming to visit. He ended up being in one of the first documentaries on the topic of homosexuality. Yeah, and then I think later that year, the same week or so, a woman hit on me, and I'm straight, but it was kind of interesting. I'm like, does she think I'm okay? Anyway, that's my story. Thank you for your talk. Very timely.
Thank you.
Hey, we appreciate you sharing, Leonarda. And Johanna is next. She's got her hand up. Here you go,
Thank
Johanna.
you. Thank you, France, for your presentation. And I was wondering, she, her, does that, would that be something that a transgender would put if they identify as a woman? Or would
Yes,
they?
absolutely.
So who would we think are the they, them? Like, I kind of identify that that's a very open, you know, opportunity
Yeah.
for not identifying with anything, but it doesn't mean anything necessarily. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Or not?
Well, it doesn't mean anything. It means a lot to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And
What does
so
it mean? What does it mean?
it's letting you know their internal sense of self. So they, if someone says I identify, I use the pronouns they them, that means that they don't identify as either male or female. But let's say a transgender person comes, and that's where it takes away the assumption that we talked about earlier. So somebody who comes in and physically looks like a woman, but says, I use a pronoun he, him, then it takes away your assumption that this person who looked to your eyes looked either like a, I forget which example I use now, but one way or than the other. And it's just clarifies it. So it takes away your assumption. But again, a transgender or cisgender person can, no, not the cisgender, transgender person can also identify as they. So it's, you know what? Okay, so let me step back a second and say, if somebody comes up and introduces you with their pronouns, it's clear that's who they want. That's what they want to go by. If you're not sure, you can ask. If it's in a small group, or you're having a one-on-one conversation, you can say, what pronouns do you go by? It's totally, well, I should say totally acceptable. It depends on the culture. There's a lot of culture influence here as well. But I would say here, you could ask. If you're not sure, ask. If they tell you, then you go by what they want. And maybe I can touch to Natalie's intro about the chicks and the women. If, Natalie, if you knew we all identify as women and chicks, well, maybe, like you say, some of them might be feels fancy. I could see some people could take offense to that. It might have a under some other meaning to different people. If you're with a group of people, you know, hey, it's chicks night tonight, go for it. Why not? But as a group, if you're talking to a group that you don't know, then maybe I would use more gender neutral terminology. So Joanna, I don't know if I answered your question.
I think it's I just wondered if saying they them was gender neutral. And for me personally, it would mean I want everyone to be treated with respect and not particularly as as their gender identity. So yeah, it's a little bit it's just interesting. Do I encompass this idea? You know how on a work application it says male, female, or other? Would putting female jeopardize my chances of getting the job? Can I see a world where we could all be they, them, where it just doesn't matter? That's where I was coming from.
Right. Hopefully we can. And I think that's, if you're addressing a group or something in general, then they them is definitely the way to go. But if you're addressing one person who wants to be addressed a certain way, then that's where you would just follow that person's wishes.
That answers my question. Thank you,
Okay,
Franz.
good.
Yeah, great question, Johanna, and really good clarifying, Franz. Now we've got time for one more question briefly. Leonarda has her hand up. Was there anyone else who hadn't asked yet who wanted to ask a question? I don't see anyone else, so here, Leonarda, yeah, and then we'll finish.
Okay. Yeah, Joanna's comment really got me thinking toward the end there, like, we are all they, them. Like, why don't we all be just human beings, kind of thing. So, so that led me to think about the patriarch out there, and would this possibly help dissolve the patriarch and make the matriarch be a little bit more present? So that's my question to you. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally think that could be, because then you're putting everybody on the same playing field, at the same level. There is no chance of thinking of it, even though it might not be at different levels, but it leaves no chance to interpretation of it or assumption by anyone. So if we're all on the same playing field, I think that's the way we should go through the world. And like someone said, let's just all get along and be respectful of everyone.
Yeah.
And I have to say that doesn't only apply to the LGBTQ plus community. It applies in all aspects of life. With all the wars going on and everything these days, if we all try to understand each other a bit better, I would just hope that we'd be in a better world.
Well, I have to say that I went to a drag something in Gibson back in January or December, and they were the friendliest people. They were the nice people to hang out with, and I went, wow, I can really relate to these people. What does that mean about me? I don't know, but there was a dance break and everybody was dancing. I mean, there was an intermission, everyone was dancing. I'm like, wow, these are like really awesome people. So and same, just same in the burlesque community. People are just really mostly non-judgmental. It was lovely, lovely energy. Anyway,
Exactly. It just means you can all go there and have a good time. And that's why when they have the drag shows, the drag queens at the library that was shut down through so many communities, it just breaks my heart, because the kids just go and have a good time, and that's what they see. That's all they see, is everybody having a good time. So let's just have a good time.
Well,
thank you so much.
Oh, squeeze in a cisgender question. Sure. I don't get the cisgender. I mean, I looked it up. Cisgender is assigned female at birth, and I find but what does the cis stand for? Anything? CIS? Where did that term come from? Cisgender.
I didn't know that at one point. Oh, you're gonna test me now. I'll look it up during the break, and I'll try to come back to you. But I'm not sure if it. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. I heard it like I think Sarah used it, and she was showing off. She cisgender. Oh yeah, I've heard that word. What does it mean? I looked it up. No, it's a good showing off, Sarah. Anyway, I just was curious about the term. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Great question. I was wondering that too, but we'll find out from Fonz after the break, right? But it's a good place to conclude, to finish, and I'm going to hand this back to end the show back to Natalie.
Oh,
thank you, Franz.
Franz, that was absolutely wonderful. I'm hoping that I can speak for everybody. It was very enlightening. It was very interesting, and you certainly have broadened my horizons and my different concepts. I really liked when you said versus correcting versus understanding, and you created a space for understanding with your speech and your presentation. So that was absolutely wonderful.